A grown man who spent 30 years working the night shift at a steel plant doesn't cry easily. His hands are calloused, his back is bent, and somewhere along the way, he learned to keep the harder feelings buried. But on a September evening in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, standing in a packed auditorium with thousands of strangers, he wasn't hiding anything. Tears ran freely down his face, and he didn't wipe them away. Because the song playing wasn't just a song to him. It was the voice he heard in the hospital room when the doctor used the word cancer. It was what played softly at his father's funeral. It was the melody that came on the radio the night he nearly gave up on everything. That song was written by Kirk Tally, a songwriter from Harlan, Kentucky, who most of the world has never heard of. And yet, without stadium tours or major label backing or a viral moment, he wrote himself into the deepest parts of people's lives. This is the story of what happened at the National Quartet Convention in 2024, the night the Southern gospel world gathered to honor one man's catalog of songs. But calling it an honor feels too small. What unfolded that evening was something closer to a reckoning, a gathering of thousands of people who had been quietly carrying the weight of Tally's music in their chests for decades, finally getting the chance to exhale together. The National Quartet Convention has been running since 1957. Every September, the Southern gospel faithful make the journey to Pigeon Forge. They come from coal country and farming towns, from city apartments and suburban cul-de-sacs. Some of them have attended every single year for 3 and 4 decades. They've watched young unknowns become giants of the genre. They've watched those giants age, and some of them die. They've sung the same songs so many times that the words don't require thinking anymore. They just rise up out of some deep place and come out. If you've never been part of a community like this, it can be difficult to explain why someone would travel hundreds of miles every year for the same event. But for the people who understand it, no explanation is needed. These are their people. This is the one place where they don't have to translate anything about themselves. The 2024 convention was different from the ones before it. Rather than the usual format of showcases and new releases and industry awards, this year centered on a tribute to Kirk Tally's body of work. Over 30 years, Tally had written songs that became embedded in the life of an entire genre. Not just popular, the way a hit single is popular for a season and then forgotten. Embedded, the way certain words become impossible to separate from the memory they were first attached to. His songs played at weddings and funerals and Sunday morning services and late-night drives when someone was trying to hold themselves together. The organizers understood that honoring this catalog meant acknowledging something bigger than music. It meant acknowledging the lives those songs had entered and changed. Kirk Tally grew up in Harlan, Kentucky, deep in the Appalachian coalfields. It's a place where faith isn't a hobby or a social identity. It's survival equipment. The church he grew up in had worn wooden pews and a slightly out-of-tune piano, and it didn't need anything else. What it had was people who sang like they meant every syllable, because they did. Old women with eyes closed, entirely somewhere else. Coal miners who held themselves rigid all week long and then let something loose on Sunday morning in the middle of a hymn. The young Kirk Tally was watching all of this, absorbing what music actually was before he ever sat down to write any of it. He learned early that a song's job wasn't to sound impressive. Its job was to be true. That understanding became the bedrock of everything he would write. It's also the quality that separates his catalog from the enormous volume of gospel music that gets written, recorded, celebrated briefly, and then quietly disappears. Most songs in any genre are written to succeed. They're shaped by what's working right now, what radio programmers respond to, what wins awards. There's real craft in that approach, and some genuinely good music comes out of it. But Tally's songs weren't written to succeed. They were written because he needed to write them. He was processing real pain, real doubt, real questions about faith and worth, and whether any of it held up under the pressure of actual life. The songs were medicine before they were music. The fact that they became successful was almost secondary. When you study the songs that have lasted, 3 qualities show up consistently. The first is that Tally never wrote from a position of having figured things out. He wrote from inside the question. Take the most well-known example, Who Am I? A song that millions of people have held close in their hardest moments. That song wasn't written as a theological statement about unworthiness and grace. It was written by a man who genuinely did not know the answer. He was asking. And when people heard it, they recognized the question as their own, because it is everyone's question at some point. That sudden confrontation with your own smallness and the desperate need for something larger to still find you worth loving. The second quality is the way his songs move. They begin in a specific, personal place and then expand outward until they hold something communal. A song might start with one voice, one set of circumstances, one private moment of struggle or gratitude. But by the time it reaches its center, it has become a song everyone in the room can sing from their own particular story. This is technically very difficult to achieve, and most songwriters never manage it. Either the song stays too private to reach anyone else, or it reaches for universality so quickly that it loses all texture and specificity. Tally somehow found the narrow passage between those two failures, again and again, across decades of writing. The third quality is the honesty of the ending. His songs don't resolve into easy triumphalism. They resolve into something more honest, which is the ongoing presence of faith in the middle of an ongoing struggle. The message isn't that the valley is behind you. It's that you are not alone in the valley. That distinction matters enormously to the people who need these songs most, because they've been told too many times that faith should have already put the hard thing behind them. At the convention, artist after artist took the stage to perform songs from Tally's catalog. Each brought their own interpretation rather than simply replicating the original recordings. Some arrangements were traditional and reverent. Others were surprising and stripped down in ways that revealed new layers in the underlying material. What was consistent across every performance was the weight the songs were carrying into the room. You could feel the audience meeting each song with their own accumulated history with it. Thousands of people, each arriving at the same lyric from a completely different direction, through a completely different set of memories, and landing in the same place. One artist, speaking before his performance, described reaching a point where he had decided to quit music entirely. His label had dropped him. He was broke. He had his equipment packed and was preparing to sell it. Then Kirk Tally's voice came on the radio, and something in him shifted. He wrote his next album in 3 weeks. That album changed everything. The crowd understood this story in their bones because they'd had their own versions of it. Someone arriving at the right moment, at the right frequency, and breaking through. Video testimonials played throughout the evening. A woman in her 70s described how her husband had loved the love of God for 47 years. After he died of cancer, she couldn't listen to it for 2 full years. The song was too much of him, too much of what she had lost. Eventually, she made herself play it again. And instead of being destroyed by it, she found herself held by it. It connected her to her husband and to her faith simultaneously. Both things she was afraid of losing and hadn't. A man described 20 years of alcoholism and how, in a faith-based rehabilitation program, someone sang, "Who am I?" And the specific combination of acknowledged unworthiness and unconditional love reached him in a place he'd never been reached before. He has been sober for 8 years. He is back with his children. These are not incidental details. They are the actual legacy, not the chart positions or the award plaques. Then came the moment no one had announced. The lights shifted slightly, and Kirk Tally walked onto the stage. The auditorium came apart. People were standing, some shouting, some frozen, completely silent, all of them broken open in some way. What followed wasn't a performance. He didn't sing, he talked, and what he said was not what people expected from a night built on celebration. He talked about the times he wanted to stop. Not just music, everything. He talked about the public struggles people already knew about and the private ones they didn't. The crowd went completely still. And then he said the thing that people in that room will repeat for the rest of their lives. The songs they had been singing all night weren't written for them. They were written to him, from God, so he could survive. They just happened to need them too. That sentence reorganizes everything. The songs that became anthems for an entire genre were first emergency communication, personal dispatches from a man trying to find a reason to keep going. He had no idea he was writing a wedding staple or a funeral comfort or a recovery anchor. He was writing to stay alive, and in that private necessity, he stumbled into something universal. This is what authentic art actually does. It doesn't aim at resonance, it aims at truth. And truth, it turns out, travels. He also said something that cut against decades of religious messaging. The same faith that saves you also sustains you, not by removing the struggle, but by staying present inside it. The room received this the way people receive something they have long known, but never been given permission to say out loud. Faith doesn't guarantee the absence of hard things. It means you are not facing the hard things alone. That is a different promise, and in many ways a far more reliable one. Kirk Tally's music will outlast the convention. It already has outlasted many of the moments that produced it. Young artists in their 20s were performing those songs that evening with the same conviction as people who were there when they were first released. Grandparents and grandchildren were finding meaning in the same lyric, arriving from opposite ends of life experience and landing in the same place. That is what legacy looks like when it's real. Not preservation, not nostalgia. Actual, living relevance that keeps finding new people in new pain and doing the same work it always did. Somewhere right now, someone is hearing one of these songs for the very first time. They are going through something they don't have language for yet. They feel entirely alone inside it. And then a voice comes on, asking a question that turns out to be their question too, and something shifts. The walls of the isolation move slightly. The night becomes a little less total. That is the work. That is what it means to create something that lasts beyond the moment you made it, beyond your own name, beyond anything you could have calculated or planned. Kirk Tally went into the coal country church as a child and came out knowing what music was supposed to do. 60 years later, it is still doing exactly that.